white oak tree. Gray bark. It has vertical cuts and ridges that are very shallow. The ridges don't stick out at all. And if you look at the leaves, the tips of the leaves are rounded. They are blunt. There are two groups of oak trees, the red oaks and the white oaks. In the white oak group, this particular species is called the white oak, Quercus alba. And the white oaks have some tannin in the acorns. The red oaks, which have pointy-tipped leaves, have tons of tannin in the acorns. The tannin is bitter. It can bind your digestive system, and it's something you don't want. This has minimal. Oh, parasol is great. Well, let's finish the white oak. You want to taste the acorn. It has a little bit of bitterness. You boil it. Let me go to the beginning. Take a lot of acorns. Boil them for 1 minute to loosen them in the shell. Then shell them. Use a paring knife and a grapefruit spoon to get the nut meat out. Then put the nut meat into a blender with water and grind it on low speed to the size of rice grains. Boil it repeatedly till the water no longer turns black and the acorns no longer taste bitter. These acorns have a minimum of bitterness in them. So you can almost eat these raw, and they shouldn't take much boiling to get rid of the bitterness. Then you can do a lot of things with acorns. You can put them in a food dehydrator, you get off of eBay for $15, or even put them in the oven 115 degrees with the door open and let them dry. And grind them into a powder, again in the blender, half a cup at a time, and use them in pancakes and muffins and breads. They don't make things rise, but they give an incredible, delicious, nutty flavor, and they're high in protein and also essential fatty acids. You can boil the acorn pieces in water with lemon juice, curry powder, hot sauce, seasoned salt, and some olive oil, and then drain them and roast them with more curry powder, seasoned salt, olive oil, and hot sauce if you like really hot stuff, and you get curried acorns. It's a recipe in one of my books called Park Nuts. You can also saute the acorns with some thyme, rosemary, and sage, and mix it with rice and make stuffing with it. If you're a vegan like me, you can put the stuffing into a squash and make a stuffed squash. It's basically limitless what you can do with these. The white oak does not make acorns every year. Most white oaks, you taste these things and they are pretty bitter and they require a lot of boiling. I'm not really tasting much bitterness in these. Okay, this is the red oak. This is the one, if you taste this, you'll wish you had it.
Yeah, really, I had two. One of them was much.
Yeah, these
one of them was bitter, one of them wasn't.
Yeah. Who's tasted these? A little bit of bitterness.
So this one's white oak, and this one's
This
white,
is white,
and
yeah,
that's red.
and that's the red oak. Cool. Come from one of the other trees somewhere around there. Yeah, so these are very valuable. They're perishable. See how little bitterness there is? You can detect the bitterness. It's not overwhelming.
How can you tell the difference between the nuts if you just see the nuts?
One of them has hair inside the cup, and the other doesn't. I forget which is which. That's in my book. But here, this one is short and fat, and the white oak here is longer and narrower. But the main thing is the leaves are blunt-tipped or rounded on the lobes, and the red oaks are not.
All oak trees produce acorns, and all acorns are edible, but some require less processing than other ones. And there are about 9 different species of oaks that grow in this area, and you can sort them into 2 basic categories, the hard oaks and the soft oaks, and I have no idea where those names come from. I don't think it's the hardness of the wood. And anyway, the way to tell them apart is that the hard oaks have pointy lobes on the leaves. See these leaves right here, how pointy they are? Okay, so this is a hard oak. And then the soft oaks, and I'm sorry, just have any examples right here, but they have rounded lobes on the leaves. So if you look at a white oak leaf, These are rounded and not pointy. And the acorns from the soft oak species tend to have a lower tannic acid content, and that's responsible for the bitterness in the acorns. And so if you start with ones that have less tannic acid in them, they require less processing. So this is a white oak leaf. See, rounded lobes, soft oak, pointed lobes. So the acorns from these trees tend to have less tannic acid in them. But you can still process the other ones, it just requires more time. The problem is that the process of leaching out the tannic acid also leaches out some of the nutrients and some of the flavor. And so eventually what you have will still have a lot of caloric value and it will still fill your stomach up, which is important for Native Americans. But you lose the distinctive oak flavor, the acorn flavor, which I think is the point of eating acorns, is that it tastes like something. And so that's why I like to use the white oak acorns, so what you need to do is just, because the tannic acid level varies from tree to tree, so you want to test an acorn that you find underneath the tree. Even a white oak acorn, test it. And if you get a bland flavor, maybe slightly sweet with a little bitter aftertaste, that's fine. But if it's intensely bitter right away, that's going to be the high tannic acid content. And so even with the mild ones, you still need to leach some of the acid out. And the way I do it is you shell the acorns, which you can do with like a nutcracker or a pair of pliers, because the shells are soft. And then throw the nut meats into a pot that's got boiling water in it. And after a few minutes, the water would turn this coppery color. And all the books that advise you in this process, see, keep doing it. So get another pot of water boiling in the stove, switch the nut meats to the new pot. Once that turns coppery color, put them in a third pot, and so on, and keep boiling them until the water stops turning color. But I get bored way before that and stop after like two or three times, maybe 3 or 4 times. And then I just spread the nut meats out in a cookie sheet and dry them at a low temperature oven. Or I found out this year that my food dehydrator that I use to make the fruit leather works really well to dry out the acorn nut meats after I boil them. And once they're dry, you throw them in a food processor and you grind them up to make an acorn nut meal or a flour, and that's the raw material you use for making really delicious and distinctively flavored acorn baked products. And in that handout I gave you, there's a great recipe for fall harvest muffins, which uses just 1/3 of the total flour is acorn flour, and then the other third is like cornmeal and wheat flour. Because even at just 1/3 of the total, the acorn flavor will still come through in the final product, and so you can stretch the flour you made from the acorns and get 3 batches instead of just 1 batch that way. Okay? So the white oak variety of acorns tend to sprout right away, and so before this rain that just happened, we had this unusually long, because we had such a dry spell, we had this unusually long opportunity to gather the nuts before they had sprouted. But since the rain, the white oak acorns I'm seeing have sprouted, and I suspect that would make them more bitter. I don't know that for sure, but I suspect once they sprout, they're going to start to develop more of the tannic acid content. But you could still use them. All right, got that one?
Can you talk about the cold leaching? How to do that?
The cold leaching is you just take the shelled nut meats and you put it into water, and the water will gradually turn a coppery color just from cold water, and just pour that water out and put some new water in, and it just takes a lot longer, because basically you're talking, instead of like a few minutes when you're boiling it, it's a few hours in the cold process. So it's basically 12 days to go from starting to leach them to being done. So cold leaching might result in more flavor and more nutrients in the final product.
Make a whistle out of the cats.
Right. You want to demonstrate for us? All right, excellent. Okay, that's the whistle that tells us our time is up for the walk today. So I hope you all had a good time, and hope you feel confident now to go forth and forage on your own. So thanks a lot for following me around.